This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. Let's bring to order the Clatsop County Planning Commission Tuesday, November the 10th, 2020 meeting to order. Can we please have the roll call?
Bruce Francis.
Here.
Christopher Farrar.
Present.
John Orr.
This is Carolyn Eady.
Lum Quang. Erna Patrick.
Present.
Nadia Gardner.
Present.
Robert Strickland.
Here.
Nancy Adams present. Gail Henriksen.
Here.
Julia Decker.
Present.
And Ian Sisson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as presented.
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented. This is Robert.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Robert, seconded by Nadia to adopt the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, none, so that's unanimous. Because we've got a number of people who want to speak on the public forum, I'm going to ask that we switch the minutes approval in front of business from the public. So I'm looking for a motion and a second on the minutes, October 13, 2020, Planning Commission regular meeting. I know that there were 2 copies, but after I read both, I think that was just the same, reproduced twice. Is that correct, Gail?
Yes, there are 2 copies of the October 13th meeting minutes.
Yeah.
I move that we adopt.
I couldn't see any difference, so I'll take a motion and a second to adopt as presented.
Myrna?
I move that the October 13th, 2020 Planning Commission regular meeting minutes be approved as presented.
A second.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And no abstentions, so that's unanimous. Thank you. So business from the public, this is an opportunity for anyone to give a brief presentation about any land use planning issue or county concern that's not on the agenda. However, I know that some of these concerns are going to be on the agenda, and seeing we don't have a hearing addressing this, I leave it up to Gail to introduce the first member that wishes to speak.
Okay, we have 5 members of the public who have notified me in advance that they wish to speak. I also have 4 written comments that I'll read into the record following that. So these are listed in order in which I was contacted. So the first speaker will be Roger Dorbin.
Mr. Dorbin, can you please make your presentation? So do we know if Roger Dorbin is online, Gail?
He is here, but he will need to take himself off of mute.
Okay,
Okay, can you hear me now?
we can.
Okay, so I go ahead.
Yes, you may. Please
All right.
proceed.
I was taken aback by the first sentence in the introduction of your draft document, which states that Oregon forests are working forests. This is a broad generalization that doesn't help a document that is no more useful than the accuracy, clarity, and precision of its language. Obviously, there are a lot of Oregon forests that aren't working forests. Crater Lake National Park has 286 forests. There are 2,136 miles of river in Oregon protected under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, which prohibits logging within a quarter mile of its shores. Forest Park in Oregon, the largest urban wilderness park in the country, has 10 square miles of protected forest. Multnomah County's Bull Run watershed has 102 square miles of protected forests. Oregon's 11 national forests, 21 wilderness areas, and 361 state parks are also, for the most part, free of logging. The working forest mantra was coined by the timber industry and popularized by OFRI, that acts as the industry's PR firm. It also has come into usage by the Department of Forestry and other state entities. It suggests that any forest that isn't making profits for the timber industry, providing jobs in rural communities or revenue for the counties, has no value. Never mind that when left alone, the forest stores and provides clean drinking water, sequesters climate disrupting CO2 while releasing life-sustaining oxygen, provides habitat for wildlife and recreational opportunities, as well as a place of solace, spiritual regeneration for people. The working forest mantra has helped the timber industry create a mindset in Oregon that implies that timber harvest is essential to the state's economy. Yet the state's own economists now say that revenue from the timber industry and related activities account for less than 2% of the state's gross domestic product. The biggest danger of perpetuating the working forest mindset is that it creates a justification for the timber industry to gain access to our public land. The industry sells the idea that their activities are needed on public land to help control fire, provide jobs for rural communities, and revenue for counties. None of these claims would necessarily be true if the state relied on the science of wildfires and reinstated the severance tax on timber harvest, which used to provide millions of dollars to the counties. Local land use commissions like you folks are on the front lines of the battle over control of our public lands. It's been going on for decades. By definition, public land literally belongs to we the people, not the timber industry, the Oregon Department of Forestry, or the Federal Forest Service. We the people own it. As our representative, the Land Use Commission has a great responsibility, and I hope you will carefully consider the implication of using slogans like working forests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorn.
Well,
Gail, who's our next speaker?
Next is Carolyn Eady.
Hello, Carolyn Eady. I live in Southeast Astoria, having lived in Jewel for a number of years. I'm here today to give you my thoughts regarding Goal 4 Draft 1 rewrite. In particular, I wanted to emphasize how forestry and climate change are intertwined. And as you know, we have a crisis in climate change. Anyway, over Labor Day or soon after it, there were huge forest fires in Oregon. Almost 750,000 acres were burned. That's more than the whole season burned in all but 4 years. Now, to put this in perspective, the whole state has 30 million acres in forest land between federal, private, state, and tribal. Now, Clatsop County is in a unique position. At least of the counties along the ocean, we are the only county with no federal land. And I don't think I have to go into much detail to explain how the whole globe is faced with a climate crisis. We are having more extreme weather, floods and droughts, more hurricanes, more wildfires, and we're seeing the ocean level rise. There is an urgent need to draw down carbon from the atmosphere, and we need to become carbon neutral as soon as possible. Trees have a tremendous ability to do this. Parts of the globe are planting millions and millions of trees, and I feel discouraged when I see that the mantra, as was stated in this state, is to cut more trees, but that's the timber industry speaking. Now, the Oregon Board of Forestry is really the mandated to set the rules and regulations between all forests in Oregon except federal. So there is a limited but very important role for the individual counties. I think you need to make sure the rules are being enforced. Are they doing what they want, they should do? So as you go through this particular draft, I hope you will realize the intertwine of trees and forests and do your part to be part of the improvements or solutions and not add to the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's next on the list, Gail?
Okay, next is Jed Arnold.
Mr. Arnold, can you please make your presentation?
Sure. Thank you for letting me speak today. I'll try and keep this relatively brief. Included in the packet for today's meeting are some concerns on the draft policies in goal 3 and 4 that I submitted to the County Board of Commissioners. I'd ask that you take a minute and review those, as well as some of the letters that were submitted to the Board of Commissioners that detail the extensive legal and technical issues with some of those draft policies. They do at this point contain fairly numerous inaccurate information and a lack of understanding of local land management policies in general. They also contain policies, and this is well outlined in some of those letters, that are outside of the authority of the county and would undoubtedly result in lawsuits both from the state government and private landowners if they were approved as currently drafted. I did attend many of these local planning meetings myself, or the I should say the CAC meetings myself, and it was my observation that engagement with people from the natural resource sector was very low. The draft policies that were submitted to the DLCD, it does seem apparent that even when people familiar with those issues did engage with the committees, their input wasn't incorporated into this document in any meaningful way. I also observed in these meetings that the committee members received extensive and thoughtful input from staff at both the county and state agencies on land management issues and the statutory authority of the comprehensive plan. Despite this, many members chose to submit draft policies that they knew were based on some inaccurate assumptions or outside of those authorities. I would just ask that the Planning Commission really thoroughly review the submitted drafts for Goal 3 and 4 and ensure that these documents are meeting the county's needs as an inclusive, fair, and legal vision for the county's future planning and not drifting into a purpose for which it wasn't intended. Especially forest management issues are really complex, and proper management can be really highly localized. There are also issues which there are a lot of passionate feelings out there in the community about. You know, I was going to say both sides of the issue, but I don't think that sides is a fair way to say that. There's a broad kind of mix of visions and feelings. Because of that passion, these are also issues where there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation that finds its way into the discussion. There are appropriate channels out there for these issues to be addressed, both at the state level and at the county level. I personally don't feel that a planning document like the comprehensive plan is the appropriate place to try and hash those issues out. And I would really like to see a hard look being taken at making sure this document is what it's intended to be.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Arnold.
Okay,
Gail,
next is Chad Washington.
Hello, can you all hear me all
Mr.
right?
Washington? Yes, we can.
Okay. I've also been involved in this process over the last year, and it's become clear to me that this document does not represent a broad cross-section of the community and the diverse set of stakeholders involved. It appears as though there are special interest groups that are being promoted. There are clear legal concerns with this draft that has taken almost 2 years to get in front of the Planning Commission in this form. And after all of that time, we still have a document that does not represent a broad cross-section of stakeholders, is full of legal concerns, and introduces liabilities to the county. So my request is that the Planning Commission review this document And I would like to see a timeline on when these corrections will be made and a commitment to getting a comprehensive plan draft that is not going to put the county at risk of lawsuits and that does what a comprehensive plan update is intended to do, not promote special interest groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Washington. I think, was it Tom Clark is next, Gail?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Mr. Clark, please make your presentation.
Based upon the proposed updates to the comprehensive plan, I do have some concerns regarding the cross-section of the county that was consulted for input into the update process. A few questions I have would be, how were the Citizens Advisory Committee members selected? And how were those positions advertised? How was stakeholder input solicited by the Citizens Advisory Committee and county staff? What was the result of those efforts? And finally, does the current composition of these committees represent a diverse, nonpartisan group of stakeholders that the comprehensive plan update process really demands? It seems as though it does not.
So, did you have any other points to make, Mr. Clark?
No, that would be it.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. So, Gail, I'm going to hand it back over to you for the review of draft 1 and goal 4 rewrite and read the text into the record.
Okay, so I have 4 written comments that were submitted, again, being read in order in which they were submitted. The first one is from Courtney Bangs of Napa. She writes that, as I have read through the proposed Goal 4 draft, I've come across a number of concerns. As it's currently written, there are a number of instances where the county would be superseding state law. ORS 527.722 through 527.726 statutes explicitly state that no county can pass rules or policy that supersede the Forest Practices Act. It clearly prohibits a county from placing restrictions on forestry activities outside of the urban growth boundary. As such, there are a number of passages that should be removed from this draft. The Forest Practices Act was written by forestry professionals and is reviewed on a constant basis by the Oregon Board of Forestry, which is appointed by the governor. The board receives all of the latest scientific and expert opinions when it views what it should set for its rules. They weigh the long-term benefits versus the costs and attempt to uncover some of the unintended consequences of pursuing one policy over another. As a county, I believe we should follow the lead of the state, who has better access to the research and professionals who understand this topic thoroughly. That said, there are quite a few legal pitfalls written into this version, along with some serious, I assume unintended, economic and environmental pitfalls. I would also go so far as to say that there is a large contingent within the public that will be highly concerned about the heavily biased format with which this draft has been written. This current draft reflects the lack of engagement and acknowledgement of the local natural resource professionals and their thoughts and concerns. I would encourage Goal 4 to be reviewed and fact-checked by forestry sector professionals and a lawyer prior to submission for commission approval in order to prevent potential future litigation, negative economic and negative environmental impacts. The second letter is from Betsy Earls with Weyerhaeuser. She writes, thank you for the opportunity to submit comments on the Planning Commission's process to update Clatsop County's Comprehensive Plan Goal 4. As you might expect, Weyerhaeuser's ownership of almost 60,000 acres of timberlands in the county make us keenly interested in the outcome of this planning process. Weyerhaeuser is proud of our careful stewardship of our Clatsop County timberlands, and we manage our lands for long-term value and resilience. We appreciate the time and care the Citizen Advisory Committee has put into the draft thus far and recognize that such work involves both extensive effort and commitment by the individuals involved. However, we are concerned that the draft fails to recognize that pursuant to Senate Bill 1602, passed in the June 2020 special session, the governor is working to facilitate a series of mediated sessions between environmental and timber interests to discuss changes to the Oregon Forest Practices Act. Besides setting up a new first-in-the-nation pesticide notification system, Senate Bill 1602 requires a mediated process which, quote, shall develop an approach to evaluate and jointly recommend substantive and procedural changes to the Oregon Forest Practices Act laws and regulations to advance the attainment of federal regulatory assurances for aquatic and riparian-dependent species, unquote. The mediation sessions are to be held in accordance with the Memorandum of Understanding announced by the governor on February 10, 2020, which was attached to an email that I forwarded to you earlier this morning, and must take place throughout the 18 months following passage of Senate Bill 1602. Legislation resulting from the mediation is planned for February 2022. In light of Senate Bill 1602 and the serious attention given to it by environmentalists, the timber industry, and the governor's office, we request that commission members not only familiarize themselves with the new law, but delay updates to the draft, which would be impacted by coming changes to the OFPA. Thank you for your attention to our concerns. I'm happy to answer questions via email. The next letter is from Pamela Matson McDonald. And Ms. McDonald, I know you're actually on the meeting today. Did you want to speak personally, or would you like me to read your letter? Okay, well, I will take that as...
Go ahead.
Okay.
Read my letter.
Okay, will do. Water resources for our Clatsop County communities are vulnerable to timber company practices. Roads through these industrial forests contribute petroleum byproduct runoff. Cutting practices can erode slopes, ruin headwater streams, and cause landslides, with the potential to destroy watersheds and community water systems. We can learn from the lesson taught by the Jetty Creek watershed in Rockaway Beach. The majority of many of the county's community water sources are located within private timber. In Clatsop County, only Astoria and Nehalem have dedicated, sustainably maintained municipal forests where their water systems are located. Other communities all have their watersheds located within private timberlands, at risk of pesticide, herbicide, rodenticide, and roadway runoff, and all the way to total annihilation of the water source. Considering the water content of our bodies is up to 60%, its cleanliness is an integral tool for the health of every person in this county. It's a vital nutrient to the life of every cell, which acts first as a building material, regulating our internal body temperature by respiration and sweating, flushes toxins and waste products, and lubricates our joints. You get the drift. Forest practices must change for the future health of this county. And then our final set of written comments is from Katie Pritchard. I am writing you today to express my deep concern with the current trajectory of the comprehensive plan update process. As a resident of Clatsop County, I urge you to take immediate steps to review the processes being used to formulate the draft policies of the comprehensive plan and the selection process used to appoint the members of the comprehensive plan and citizen advisory committees. Significant portions of the proposed language submitted to county staff for Goal 3, agricultural lands, and Goal 4, forest lands, calls into question the ability of the current committee members to set aside their personal political agendas and formulate appropriate legal and fair-minded land use policy. The draft Goal 3 and Goal 4 policies, which were submitted to the Department of Land Conservation and Development for review earlier this year, contain numerous policies that seem to be based on inaccurate assumptions about both current land management practices in the county, i.e. Goal 3, subsections 2D and 5E, Goal 4, sections 4, 3C, and 9A, and lack a foundational knowledge of natural resource issues on the North Coast, i.e. Goal 3, subsection 5F, Goal 4, subsection 4, Goal 4, subsection 3A and 7B. Additionally, the submitted drafts of these documents contain multiple examples of policies that are not only outside of the intended scope of the comprehensive plan, they are outside of the authority of the county itself, exposing the county's taxpayers to the possibility of expensive lawsuits involving the state and private landowners were they to be adopted. Had these draft policies been written without outside input, they would be concerning enough, as they demonstrate that many committee members think it appropriate to attempt to write government policy without conducting appropriate research to inform themselves on the issues at hand. Even more concerning is that the public records from the comprehensive planning meetings show that the committees received active input on both land management issues and the statutory authority of the comprehensive plan from natural resource professionals, state government representatives, and even county employees. Rather than making use of this expert input, members chose to submit draft policies that advanced personal agendas even though they knew they were ill-advised, inappropriate, or illegal. The one-sided vision for the county that these draft comprehensive plan goals represent is a clear failure of the county to meet one of the objectives of the comprehensive plan itself. Goal 1, Objective 2, to encourage the participation of citizens representing a broad cross-section of the county's population in the planning process. The willingness of committee members to submit a document to the Department of Land Conservation and Development with many proposed policies they have been repeatedly informed would be illegal, calls into question the ability of the citizen advisory committees as they are currently appointed to carry out their duties competently and in good faith. Recognizing that these committees are composed of layperson volunteers, the county must still expect and demand that advisory committees avail themselves of the resources available to them to craft policy based on law, science, and a viable future vision for the county's diverse stakeholders. The Clatsop County Board of Commissioners should take immediate action to review the process that produced the draft policy document in its current form. The public deserves answers to the following questions. How were the Citizen Advisory Committee members selected? How were the positions advertised? What are the obligations of these voluntary committees to the county and the communities they represent? What guidance protocol were they given regarding how to solicit and incorporate broad-based community feedback? How was stakeholder input ultimately solicited by the citizen advisory committees and county staff? What was the result of those efforts? How was input from expert officials from state agencies and natural resource stakeholder feedback incorporated into the draft document by the citizen advisory committees? Has the county legal counsel been involved in the citizen advisory meetings and provided guidance to the voluntary committees in drafting the document? What elements of the current draft plan fall outside the legal authority of the county? What level of coordination has taken place between committee members, political organizations, and outside interest groups in the formation of these draft policies? Does the current composition of these committees represent the diverse, nonpartisan group of stakeholders the comprehensive plan update process demands? It is ultimately the board's responsibility to ensure the comprehensive plan update process is transparent, inclusive, legal, and reflective of actual conditions in the county. The draft plan in its current form fails in all these respects, which reflects poorly on the county. If the planning document does not adhere to these standards, the board should consider restarting the entire process, ensuring the committees tasked with developing policy prescriptions going forward include individuals with some level of professional expertise in the subject matters under consideration and have access to appropriate legal counsel and clear expectations, guidelines for soliciting and incorporating community input. And those were all the written comments that were received.
Thank you, Gail. So I guess before you go on any further, I'll ask any of the commissioners whether they wish to comment on the public comments.
I'd like to make a couple of real general comments.
Yep, I knew you would, Chris, so go ahead.
This will be short.
Mm-hmm.
This process has been going on a long time, and there was a really big effort to put the word out to everybody in the county that this was going on. It's
Right.
been on the radio, it's been in the newspapers. Gail has worked diligently to try to fill those advisory committees with enough members to be representative of the county. So for people to come at this late date and complain that there was not sufficient attempt to get decent public participation in the rewriting of this comprehensive plan is totally outrageous and totally wrong. There was ample opportunity for people to comment on this draft because it was posted online where they could see it. They could have made their comments a long time ago. So coming now and saying we ignored you is totally false. That said, the one point I agree with the last letter on is that it would be helpful to have county council attend the CAC meetings to advise on the legality of policies that they're proposing to implement in this comprehensive plan. And I'll leave it at that for now. I have a bunch of individual comments all throughout what the draft plan is right now. Oh, one other point is that apparently some of the people calling in today don't understand this is goal 4. One goal out of 19 of them. This isn't the whole picture. We've been working on a lot of stuff here. This is goal 4. This is forestry. And I know some of the people that called in think the whole world is all about forestry. It's not. There's a bunch of other issues. There's a bunch of other goals, and they're all important to the county. And we've been working on multiple goals. This is goal 4. This is just one little tiny wedge of the big pie.
Thank you very much, Chris. Are there any other commissioner comments? Well, hearing none, I would just like to say that I pretty much agree with what Chris said. I think that we have made a very earnest attempt to involve as many people and experts in their field across this whole process. I know Gail has worked exceedingly hard to get participation. It seems to me that in many times we find out at the very last minute that there's a lot of people who are upset about it because they didn't get on board at the beginning and help us determine the numbers and the expertise that's going into it. So I applaud the county staff for what they've done, but I also would like to see a little more oversight from county council to perhaps keep us out of problems litigation wise. So Gail, if you'd like to proceed with your presentation on this.
Okay, thank you. So this is the first draft, and not the last draft, but the first draft of an attempt to rewrite Goal 4 and update it for the next 20 years. We basically took the comments that were presented to us at the citizen advisory committees and incorporated them into this draft. It was sent to Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD, for a courtesy review, not a binding approval. You'll notice that, as noted in my memo and noted by several of the public speakers and comments that were received today, the county does have limitations under the Forest Practices Act on what we can address in our comprehensive plan and what we cannot, because it's just superseded by the Forest Practices Act. We have advised the citizen advisory committees of that. You'll see a lot of that is noted in the comments from staff from Department of Land Conservation and Development. We did, after we got the comments back from DLCD, we did send this off to review with our county council, who also provided some comments that are included in your packet today, along with public comments that we received to date after posting the goals on the county's website. And really, this is just presented today for you to have a beginning discussion. We are not asking the Planning Commission to make any recommendations to the Board of Commissioners on this. This is just a first draft, and we're just presenting it to you for your additional input. And at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, we'll go again. Any commissioner want to make any comments about the draft? Chris, you want to put forward a few more points?
Well, just one quick one is I was a little uncertain what county council's format was there in terms of, were there points she was identifying that she felt were legally not tenable for the county to take on? There's underlined sections. Certainly the strikeouts indicate that she felt they should be stricken. But what's the underlining mean? And it seems like she had very few comments on the legal aspects of some of the policies. And frankly, I have a lot of questions about the legal policies that are trying to be incorporated into this document. And my overall feeling about it is that really it's great to have the introductory material that talks about Clatsop County and what its forest is like, and maybe a little history of how it's been used and so on. I think that's all good to have in there. But I think it ought to be stated up front that the county has very little jurisdiction in anything that it can do, and that most of the forest is owned privately, and the part that's operated by the state, which is, I don't know, 30% of the county, that's pretty much handled at a state level and doesn't involve the county at all. And so when people live here and they look up at the big green forest, it's not yours. It's all private land, or it's state land that's controlled by the full population of the state of Oregon. And you have little to say about it. I think we ought to have a big sign on each highway as you enter the county that, hey, it's not our forest, so if you don't like the way it looks, it's not our fault, because we don't have a say. The state decides. So if we want our forest in Clatsop County to look differently than it does and be managed differently, then we need to work at the state level and forget talking to the county about doing something it has no legal jurisdiction to accomplish. That's all I have for now.
Nadia, your comments, please.
Well, I first want to thank all the public that's either submitted comments, written, or showed up today, or did both. It's such great, it's really important for us to have participation like this. And I'm just thinking about, this last week and our divided nation, and our tendency to surround ourselves with people that think similarly. And that makes us think that everybody thinks that way. And clearly they do not. And even in our own cities and counties, that is reflected. So here we have a county of about 35,000 people. And in certain areas, timber is a big part of their lives. And so especially in northeastern Clatsop County and off 26 and Nehalem, the Highway 53, those areas, have a huge culture around the timber industry. And so you have that. And then you have everybody else. And the vast majority of people in our county are not involved in timber and live here with other interests and values. And so, where I live in Southwest, our biggest industry is tourism, hospitality, and retirement. And most people coming here, whether they are living here or visiting here, vacation homeowners or occasional tourists, are coming because of our natural beauty and health of our environment. And so that's a very different culture than Northeast or just East Clatsop County. And so it sometimes I think it's surprising for people to see, what they see as special interest groups dominating. But you know, that is the view of the people, some of the people that are on these committees. And I think we need to respect that people have different views in the county, and honor that. I'll say that, you know, my experience down in Arch Cape is that the back hills of Arch Cape are managed industrially, and we've been really challenged by the Forest Practices Act protecting us, because we've had 2 wildfires here, started in the wintertime, but east winds picking up and driving it down right up to my neighbors' homes. Very scary events. And then we've had to replace our entire water plant because the Forest Practices Act is not adequate in preventing sedimentation, which is cancer causing, frankly, in our water system. And because of those challenges, and we've worked cooperatively with the timber owner for years, but we recognize that really the only way to protect our community would be to buy that forest, because the state is not adequately protecting us. And so we're going to tax ourselves. We're going to spend $5 million to protect ourselves. Not every community is privileged enough to be able to do that. And so we have to figure out, you know, how we can protect everybody. And so, you know, that's, you know, our job as a county is to protect the well-being of our community members. And part of that is really being honest about the impact of some of these industrial timberlands on our, especially drinking water quality and quantity. I think that comes out again and again, that's a challenge, and it's a growing challenge. So I did write down some comments that I'm going to send in to staff, you know, some very specific things, but I wanted to point out that it is my understanding that, well, first of all, that it's important that every community from the local, state, federal, and international level has a voice in what they think needs to change. And so you can't leave everything to the state. You also have to do it on your local level. And I think we do have a role in that. But what we can't do, which is clear, is we can't pass rules like, you know, ordinances or laws or whatever to change to affect what the Forest Practices Act manages. But what we can do is we can actually prohibit timber harvest in properties that are not zoned as either AF or F80. That's my understanding. So there is actually a legal avenue, and that's a pretty extreme avenue. And I don't think that most of the people in this room would support that. Like, actually, you know, is that what you want? You know, so it's better to like try to work on some sort of compromise. Like, how can we protect our communities without, you know, having to go to those extreme, well, some might say are extreme aspects, but you know, there already are zonings in our county. In Arch Cape, actually, our Arch Cape zoning, I believe, prohibits timber harvest, and we could expand that if we wanted to. And I feel like the comp plan, I mean, really the comp plan is a guidance document. And so it's not, you know, the next stage is to update the zoning ordinances, the land and water development codes. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the language around that. And so this is aspirational, right, for the most part. And when I read the draft, what I saw mostly was encourage. And that is very different than requiring. And so I think that people should look very carefully at that language and see, and I think the legal review, you know, recognize that it wasn't illegal for these groups to say, hey, we'd really like to encourage something that's a little bit better than what we currently have. And so I would just support that from that standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. That's an interesting point you make. I kind of thought the same thing, that it was to encourage, it wasn't mandatory. I thought that was interesting that you brought that point up. Are there any other commissioners? Robert, please.
Hi. You know, I expect if I'd made notes, I'd have at least 40 silly little comments to make. There are, you know, my first reaction was to see what all does forestry forestry think it has a stranglehold on. And I use that term advisedly. You know, there has been plenty of comment that this isn't our business to deal with it. I've, you know, in all the years we've been around here, there's the usual argument at every level, federal, state, down, are these regulations a baseline that we can do better than? And of course, doing better than means opposite things in the political spectrum. You know, I try to read the entire stupid Oregon Revised statute in its own language, and I certainly get my legs tangled with the notwithstanding wherewithal, including subsections, this, that, and the other herewith. It isn't, you know, the overall idea that, hey, they may make it sound that forestry covers everything anywhere in the county. It's not about industrial forest lands. It's not about F80. It's anything outside of city limits where trees are grown, you know, and basically it's not our business to do anything that constrains the Forest Practices Act from being applied. You know, I'm sitting here looking at a forest, but I also thought, well, gee, you know, where one of the issues was about eliminating the understory. Well, gee, that having the understory, I'm not trying to have a Louisiana timber plantation. I like the image that used to be on the postage stamps of the Northwest that showed a complex understory. And you know, in here it makes it clear that anytime the forester thinks there is vegetation that will burn, it's within his domain. You know, so it's a rather sweeping concept that we can't have say that, gee, in certain zones we would like to have pretty parklands. Even if it's a county park, those attitudes applied to it would say, hell no, you do not have control over the vegetation understory. You know, there's just a lot here. There was the concept of keeping the gates open for recreation. Well, it happens, I don't like the concept of recreation that's widespread, of that it's fun to go kill Bambi and Bambi's family. That's just not the sound of it is irksome. You know, there's a little doe that came in limping yesterday in front of me. I'm not expecting to change, but to have that, you know, it's in this draft, that's kind of one of the great solutions to take care of things is to have more blood sportsmen out there eliminating the problem. They don't call them blood sportsmen, but I don't know a preferable term. Yeah. Anyway, I'm happy to go through this. This is not going to be our last stab at it, but this doesn't just apply to industrial forest lands. It acts like forestry means anytime there's a tree grown anywhere in the county outside of city limits, practically period. You know, it includes on farmland, on open space, parks and recreation, on aquatic natural, anywhere. You know, it's rather sweeping. And I guess that would be where I'd expect to link arms with the angry right wing. I certainly had no help reviewing this document. I certainly wondered if our new county commissioner had help drafting her letter that we received. You know, the dialogue is difficult. It's I've been involved in Clatsop County community involvement since 1993. I have trouble doing the math, but however many years ago that is. And no matter how many notices, how earnestly you try and draw people in to the discussion, you always have this strange, hey, how did you get picked? Well, shit, we pleaded for you to come to our meetings. And typically, people who didn't care to be in those meetings didn't last very long and would go away and then not participate. But I'm going to shut up. But I don't try and place the burden on the poor county council. You know, county council in the past have been just as bad about that basic thing of, is this a baseline that where now we can do something better than that? That's going to have polar opposite ideas of what's better, being more protective or being invite the wastrels in to make a buck. You know, period. Thanks all.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So any other commissioner comments? Yes, go. Yes.
Me? This is Lum. You guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, Lum, go ahead.
Yes. Excuse me. So I am very new at this. Believe it or not, English is my second language, and trying to read over this, it was really hard for me to get a grasp of what went on. And of course, I wasn't a part of coming up with any of the drafts in the first place. But to me, forestry, just looking around, isn't very healthy around. I mean, for most of it, but what I see driving around, not just in our county, but it's not very healthy. And we've cut. I mean, there's only place that I know that we have a stretch of oak growth is up in Teal Slough up in Washington. That isn't any place that I know of that has remotely any stretch of oak growth. And as we know, when the forests burn, old trees are what's standing. And when you clear cut the forest, the only thing that are growing back are tiny twigs. And if that becomes dry, it'll burn like like tinder burn. And the animals are practically gone from and the watershed are pretty much in trouble. And as they go back and trying to replant the trees, and then of course all the chemicals has to be sprayed to kill all the weeds around it, and then all that chemical gets to bleed into the watershed, and that's what we drink, and that's what we consume, as not just me but everybody around, my children and everybody's children are consuming this, and the fish that run out to the ocean, and And so of course, I really need help of understanding our drafts, the draft of this, and in hoping that we come up with a better way of managing our forestry and our land that for not just for us, for future children and their future. So yeah, basically that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lam. So, Myrna, I can't see you because you're on the phone. Is there anything you wanted to say?
I just wondered about what control we have over 70% of our privately owned forest land, and
Right.
what is our next step in this process?
Is that a question to staff?
It's a question to everybody, whoever.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I kind of agree with you. I think that private timber industries have definitely a lot more say over their own running of their property. I mean, it is their property. So I think that they should have quite a significant amount of control over that. And of course have government oversight on top of it so that they don't go crazy over it. But I agree. I think that private industry needs to be represented. You know, it was just like Chris Farrar was saying, when you drive into the county, everything you see is not your forest. And it's a large proportion of private timber industry and their lands. So I think we should have them included in this pretty well. The only comment that I would like to make is that perhaps this first draft, and I think Chris put it out there, that this is only a small section of the pie. This is draft one. Maybe all the comments that have been included in draft one has drawn the criticism that we needed and the input that we needed at the beginning. So maybe with oversight from staff and oversight from county council, we'll be able to sort this out now that we've got an uproar of many more participants. Maybe this is a good thing, and that maybe the second draft will be more amenable to everybody. I think that's where we're trying to head to. Just like Nadia said, we've got to try and compromise. Let's try and compromise and work this out. So anyway, that's all my comments. Sorry, Robert.
Yeah, I've appreciated specificity on complaints. You know, when people would say, "Oh, there are massive things that are horrible here," and yet I really didn't have any idea about what they were pissed.
Right. Yes.
You know,
I agree.
I really valued. I forgot if it was Hampton executive who at least had lots of specifics. Right. You know, and that really helped me. I love what's his name, Clark. But I just know he's upset, and I'm hoping that that we can have more markups of what precisely. You know, the idea that that private ownership gives you power, not according to an awful lot of what is being claimed here, that you know the county doesn't have power over its land to do something different. You know, it's as if everything has to follow Forest Practices Act, which includes telling you what frigging kinds of trees you need to plant. And I look out here, and the approved trees are like Doug fir with its Swiss needle cast, spruce that are having a really hard time in the county. I see the ones that are happiest, and they're pines, which are not considered local natives. And then as I read the rules, that anytime you want to go do something different, you need to prove that it already works as a species. You know, I mean, this is just from reading the language in the law, that you can't innovate. That's against the law. You know, I remember taking several pots of plants down to the the conservancy down there by the crab broiler, and gee, they couldn't keep them. In fact, they really, by their rules of keeping only native species, needed to get rid of the little pioneer cherry tree on the property. All they could have were their local natives that are having a hard time with climate change, don't like our weather, you know, and yet I used to enjoy bringing in new things, the dawn redwood, the Austrian black pine, all these things that just say, hey, climate change is cool. We're growing so big and beautiful, but none of them are listed as allowable species in this bureaucratese dictation of what we're supposed to follow. And you know, and anyway, yeah.
Well, I think that Senate Bill 1602 may put a bit of a change on that. Robert, you and I have both been to many, many of the forestry tours. And my bottom line on that was that each individual timber company, it seems to me, was very innovative. They were trying a lot of new things. They were out there with new equipment, new harvest techniques, new planting procedures, new fire demonstrations. I mean, it seems to me like they are innovative. So I don't think that we're sticking to the old rules and regulations. I really applauded the timber companies for all the innovations that they were bringing up. I found that very interesting. So,
and I narrowly was thinking about, like, on species,
right,
where they say, no, you need to plant something that has been proven to work. You know, something for which there is an existing market that has been proven to work locally. And I'm saying,
that's a financial decision. You know, that's the financial decision of the timber company. What works and what the sales are required. But I mean, Swiss needle cast was something that swept through here quite a few years ago and caused us to change from Doug fir, putting it further away from the coast and further inland. And then we've had this aphids attack in all the spruce. I mean, that aphid attack was pretty horrendous. I had to take two what I call old growth, over 100-year-old trees out of where I work. They were killed by the aphid. So yeah, things are up and down.
For Lam's benefit, I think one of the letters that we got today pointed out where the big trees are too big for our mills, you know, that we really don't want, you know, from an industrial perspective, don't want big trees. And that's old thinking. You know, there isn't, period.
Yep. All right.
It's going to be hard to come to consensus.
Yep.
Sure, Francis.
Well, let's move along here. Gail, do you have anything else to add to this review of the draft?
I do not. I know that Commissioner Gardner has had her hand raised for quite a while, and we have not had any comments from John or.
Okay. Nadia, can you go first?
I was just hoping, so Chad reiterated his question, which I think is a legitimate one about our process. So You know, so we've gone through the community advisory, gone through the, let's see, the community teams, and then you've gone to this comp plan update, like larger body. Now you've brought it to us. Then you'll integrate our comments into the draft, and then does it go back, or what's the process like going forward? And then also when we get to something that's semi-final, are you going to be, you bring it back to us for a recommendation? Are you going to be bringing it back as like the whole document, or are you going to start doing it kind of in chapters like you were doing with the last update that we did, where we don't have to read the whole thing at the same time? So like 1 through 4 goes to us, we make a recommendation, and then it goes to the county commission, or how's that going to work?
So everything, we don't want to adopt it chapter by chapter, because what we do then is risk setting up conflicts internally within the comprehensive plan, where you have a new updated chapter that may conflict with an existing chapter that hasn't been updated yet. So we will be bringing it in sections, but at one, when everything is done. So we won't make you go through one meeting and read through the entire comprehensive plan, but there will be a series of meetings that will result in a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, and then we would handle that the same way with the board, because it is a lot of reading. And I was answering a question about where the video will be posted of the meeting. I put that in the chat box, so unfortunately, Commissioner, I missed your first question.
Well, so where does this chapter go now? So like we've given some comment, we've gotten a bunch of public feedback, which is excellent. I assume staff will do some updates from those comments, and then does it go back to the community committees?
Yes, it'll go back to the committees, and then it'll come back to the Planning Commission as well.
And that'll be it. So like we'll just see it one more time.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, it will depend partly on the feedback we get on the second go around. If everybody's happy with it, we wouldn't see a need necessarily to take it back for a third rewrite. But obviously, if there are still comments and concerns and questions and issues that need to be addressed, then we would take it back for a third rewrite or a fourth or a fifth, as many as it takes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't have you on my screen, John, so did you want to make a comment? Is John Orr there? So
he is listed on the list of participants, but I don't know if he's actually physically listening right now.
Okay, well, if he's not, then I guess we'll go on to special projects update. Oh, Chris, quick comment.
Quick comment or quick question, Gail. Would it be appropriate for any member of the Planning Commission to directly contact some of the folks in DLCD staff that reviewed the document to ask them particular questions about some of the things they said?
Yeah, I don't see that. You could not do that. They aren't part of our process per se, so I wouldn't consider that an ex parte communication. They're basically an extension of the county staff, and you're allowed to speak with county staff about issues.
Yep, I agree with that. Okay, so
however, having said that, I would encourage you that to keep everything above board and transparent, that if you do speak with a staff member from DLCD, that you can come back to the meeting and report your conversation with them, so that all of the planning commissioners have the same information.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Gail, let's go on to special projects update.
Okay, before we move on, I did have a question from Chad Washington. He wants to know whether or not those communications that the Planning Commission members would have with DLCD members, would those be public record? If there is a public record, it would be coming from the state, because that would be a conversation with a state employee. The reason that we want to have those conversations reported back at the Planning Commission in a public setting is that it does make them public information at that point, and that everyone whether you're a planning commission member or a staff member or a member of the public would have that same information. So Chad, I don't know if that answered your question, but if you need a clarification, please let me know. Moving on to special project updates. There was a memo included in your packet for today's meeting. The items that are highlighted in yellow are areas where we have updates. Not a whole lot of updates this month, only 4 of the projects. So the Clatsop Plains elk with Oregon Solutions, we had originally looked at taking the final declaration of cooperation, which would spell out the county's responsibilities and roles in working with the other jurisdictions and agencies to reduce human elk interaction. That was supposed to go before the Board of Commissioners in November. We recently had a series of issues come up that were not part of the original discussions related to county approval of culling of elk on Camp Rylea property and also on other properties in unincorporated county. So we've pulled that item from the November agenda, obviously, and we have scheduled it for a work session in January once the new commission is installed. This afternoon at noon, in approximately 49 minutes, there will be a Board of Commissioners work session for the strategic plan, and they will be reviewing the 5 focus areas where the groups have put together their recommendations for priorities for the next 12 to 18 months. I did send the planning commissioners a link to that meeting this morning if you're interested in attending. There's also a link on the county's website where anybody from the public is encouraged to attend. The work sessions typically do not take public input, but it's a time for the board to be able to discuss things in a public setting.
Does the elk declaration exist somewhere visible to the public, or is it still trapped in the 24 public employees that collaborated?
Yeah, so it's still trapped in public government employee limbo or purgatory. I have a draft that I'm happy to share. To me, it's public record, so I have no problem sharing it. The issue of the culling is not in that draft, just so you know. That was an issue that was verbally communicated to us during our steering committee meetings.
And culling is a euphemism for killing?
Culling is, you can call it a euphemism. It means to kill. It's no different than if we were to say murder or genocide or elkicide. It means that the elk would be no longer living.
Thank you.
Relocation was not discussed?
There are many things that are discussed. Relocation, I think from the information I understood from Department of Fish and Wildlife was that relocation was not necessarily, I'll say viable. I don't know that that's the exact word they used, but that was
it's extremely expensive.
So, and I want to be very clear that culling is not the only option that has been put forth. It's not as if the declaration says we shall cull the elk, and that's the only thing that's written in the declaration. There are a variety of tools that relate to education, from school children to tourists to residents to you know, all sorts of different things. There are looking at ordinances and how land use and residential development impact elk behavior, where they can go, where their foraging lands are, where they can find water. So I think to take the issue of culling and say that that's the only thing that's happening with the declaration would be very incorrect.
I think it's a nicer word than harvest. I think it's a more honest word anyway than harvest.
Okay. Thank you, Gail.
If you want, I can finish my report. Otherwise, I'm happy to move on.
No, I'm saying move on now to where code consolidation modernization.
Yeah, so we went for a first reading last week on November 4th. The second reading is currently scheduled for December 9th. For members of the audience who may not be familiar with this, we are taking the 2 documents that currently provide regulations for land use and how property is used. We are combining the two documents into one. We are updating some terminology, and for example, we have different zoning districts where, depending on the zoning district, sometimes the county engineer makes decisions about stormwater. Sometimes it's the building official, sometimes it's the community development director. So trying to update those types of items, make them consistent. We have not proposed any changes to the regulations, and that is not the intent of that project. Is simply to combine the documents into two documents into one and group like information together so that it's easier to use both for staff and contractors, but also for general members of the public. And then finally, the Resiliency Project, they held a work session on October 6th. At that point in time, the consensus was to continue the due diligence, specifically related to the purchase of the sort yard, and no additional work is being planned at this time for the main lines that were being considered for purchase. And so that means that as we move forward, you are likely to see sometime in the new year, probably in February, a goal exception coming forward for the sort yard. And I think, well, I know that since I've been here since January of 2018, this will be the first time the Planning Commission is looking at a goal exception. I don't know if any of you have been through this process in the past, but that will be quite a bit of discussion and probably a lot of reading, and be something a little bit different for everyone to look at. And that concludes my special project update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions
on the resiliency project, the consensus, was that determined by plop, or was there actually a motion?
Yeah, the December meeting would be on the 16th.
You know, was action actually taken, or was it more non-action was taken and that was determined to be consensus?
It must mean November, because he told me he was going to get the agenda to me today. So,
sorry, the person who is labeled SRB administrator, you need to mute yourself, please. We can hear your conversation.
It's creeping up.
Okay. So at the work session, the board does not make motions. They just discuss things that come to a consensus. So there is not an official motion.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on the housing recommendations. Is that okay, Bruce?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just so as a Seaside School District parent, as you all know, the governor has loosened her metrics around schools reopening as our right as our COVID cases are going up. And in our county, there's a lot of pressure that for schools to reopen, and our district is looking at a reopening on December 7th. And one of the reasons, it's not because it's safe, because I don't think it is, but is because so many families in our community are on the verge of being homeless because their parents can't work with kids at home doing online school. So we're coming to that crisis point that Gail alluded to when presenting that affordable housing information to us, adding, we've always had a hard time with our expensive housing, but now with the COVID crisis, we really are gonna, I think, are really facing a homelessness crisis just as the winter begins. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I'm just hopeful. I wish I could put that on my plate, but I'm just hopeful that especially the cities are working diligently at, like RV camps at churches or anything. Just, we've got to put something in place really quickly so that children are not living in cars with their parents all over the streets. It's, it's always been an ongoing issue, I think, up in Astoria and then in Warrenton, but now I see it all over the county. It's gotten so much worse, and so that's my comment.
I've been thinking a lot about this as well. You know, it's kind of a pipe dream thing, but it can be a quick, easy solution. Is that we have all these railroad tracks that have been abandoned. I mean, how hard is it for the county over to bring in I know bunch of what do you call box cars and have people camp in it if it comes down to that. Man, but that's like, you know, probably the worst case, probably emergency scenario, but that a solution like that can happen. Another thing that I have been thinking about is, I don't know what the process is, but there seem to be a lot of people that kind of, like you said, is on the verge of losing their housing. How is it possible for somebody to buy a piece of land and ask the county for permission to build smaller housings, like just say 5 units that people can build their small homes on, some sort of small homes that are sustainable and people can share resources like, you know, sewage and that's all isn't necessary for that. I wonder what kind of permit process that one have to go through to to ask the county for that kind of permit.
So Gail, did you want to comment on that?
So the concept that Commissioner Kwong has described would be, quite frankly, very difficult to obtain right now in the county. We typically only allow a single family home. Sometimes it can be accompanied by an accessory dwelling unit or a guest house, which comes with its own set of limitations. But the concept of doing maybe a cottage cluster or something like that, the county's regulations, which again are 40 years old, are not really set up to handle that.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
But is it, I mean, we do have a crisis looming, and how difficult is it for the county to look at that? And does it come to the planning committee to come up with some sort of solution, or is it the county staff?
So any changes to the zoning code would have to come through the Planning Commission and then go to the Board of Commissioners for final approval. And then it would also have to go to the State Department of Land Conservation and Development for review as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so how about the project status report?
Okay, Julia, would you like to speak about the Arch Cape Deli?
Good morning, everyone. So anyway, with the Arch Cape Deli, permits are in the process of being pulled. This morning we had the county engineer approve the erosion control plan for work on the old deli building, which is not going to be able to be rehabbed. It is in fact going to come down. Anyway, the development permits probably going to be issued within a few days. They are in the process of providing all of the materials. I think we have almost everything now to meet the condition of approval or all the conditions of approval for moving forward with the project. So anyway, that's actually moving ahead.
So Julia, do we need to get an extension on the I see that we're about to expire on 11/27/20. I mean, don't we need to get an extension now?
They would not qualify for an extension. They've already had one and they only get one. They're in the process of pulling their permits. If they need to, then, and it's possible, I've been talking to Vito Sorelli, who's managing the project for Mr. Coleman. They can provide substantial construction documentation, and that actually is something that we were talking about. They'll provide all of their receipts and statements and everything like that. They only need to show 10% of the expenses toward the value as established by the building codes permits, and it appears they're way over that, so they would be considered vested.
Okay, so then that would give them 2 years to complete the project.
Well, they'll pull permits and begin work. They, if it's vested, then they don't need. All they're going to do is just keep getting their building permits until they're done. And I think they're looking at being done by midsummer.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Any other comments on project status report? Okay, so any comments from commissioners? Any comments from staff?
None, thank you.
Well, we thank everybody for their attendance, and I'll ask Clancy to forward me a copy of the minutes, and I will sign it and scan it back. Thank you, everybody.
I will do so.
Okay, thank you, Clancy. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.